We explore the connection between Albany and New York here in a breaking story that you heard about first this hour here on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite, and on YouTube. Kathy Hochul delaying the implementation of congestion price tolling in New York. And this may indeed have origins here in Washington, not the actual plan, but the idea of delaying it. This is an indefinite delay. We've got an election in November. And I wonder when the new date might fall here, as Politico quotes sources saying that top officials in the governor's office, hearing from Hakeem Jeffries, floating the idea of delaying the pricing plan, as Jeffries, of course, the Democratic leader in the House, minority leader, trying to win back a Democratic majority this year. And hey, guess what, guys? Prices, inflation, for many, if not most voters, is the number one issue. Let's assemble the panel for their take on this. Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, of course, in New York with us right now. Bloomberg Politics contributor, senior democracy fellow with the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. And back with us, Lisa Camusa Miller, Republican strategist, former RNC communications director, host of the Friday Reporter podcast. It's great to see you both. Jeannie, what do you think? Was the call in Albany coming from Washington?
It very well could have been. You know, it is historic that we have, for New Yorkers, the first Senate Majority Leader from New York that we've ever had. And of course, you just mentioned Hakeem Jeffries. He is a New Yorker as well as Minority Leader in the House, hoping to be Speaker if Democrats take it. So there is a huge voice out of New York in Washington right now. And I think also what you mentioned is the fact that Democrats in particular have got to be looking at these polls, at least they should, and be saying everything else aside, the economy is number one. And when people in 2024 think about the economy and they're concerned, it is all about costs. And to add a $15 cost to somebody's commute is really, really difficult. And I will just tell you personally, I have a son that lives in Lower Manhattan, a big fan of Joe Matthews, and he has been concerned. Yeah, of course he is, Joe. He has been concerned because, you know, like many people in Manhattan, he doesn't have a car, but every time they order something, anything happening at their home, at their apartment, they are being told already for some time now the costs are going to be increasing, and that's including receiving basic packages. But the flip side of that is, of course, we have a real environmental concern. So this is a really, really difficult call, but the governor made it, and of course got some thanks from Governor Murphy across the river, who's equally concerned.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing Lisa Camusa Miller, the New Jerseyan, can relate with that a little bit. You're watching this with me from the nation's capital, Lisa, but if this actually took effect, is this a Republican strategist's dream? Here go these Democrats again raising your prices.
You know, Joe, yes, I think so. And the other thing that strikes me here is that if you'll remember, even the threat of legislation or regulation that is going to raise prices sometimes causes companies and businesses, like Jeannie mentioned, like the delivery services and some of these others, to inflate their prices or move their prices up in anticipation of that. And so that's the other thing that could very well work against the Democrats if that's the case. But I'll say too, Joe, the one thing that I noticed over the course of this morning's reading and checking in on news, it's that it appears that the minority leader and the the majority leader in the Senate and the minority leader in the House are very closely watching and making very smart political decisions about how to help some of their vulnerable members get some even stronger talking points and messages that they can deliver back home as they go home this summer to talk about who needs to get elected and reelected.
So that sounds very realistic to you then, Lisa. You worked for a former Speaker of the House, albeit a different party, but a phone call from the Speaker, or in this case, the minority leader, you're suggesting maybe Chuck Schumer to the governor's office, that's going to be an influential call.
Yeah, and I also think so too, because the governor herself will see that this is something that very well could work to the advantage. I mean, there's so many things at stake here this fall, and this alone is an opportunity to give Democrats a win and give them an opportunity to talk about issues that aren't working against them. I mean, Chuck Schumer is going to call for several votes, up or down votes, and several legislative votes about what's going to happen with contraception and some of these other issues in the Senate. And that to me just
Yeah.
strikes me as coordinated in a really good for the Democrats way. You know, they've seen the opportunity and they've seen a way that they could get themselves back on track. And that to me is
Right.
sort of how I've put that all together in my own mind.
Donald Trump has weighed in on this, Jeannie. He said he would, quote, terminate it his first week back in office if the congestion pricing, of course, Trump Tower is in the congestion pricing zone there on Fifth Avenue. Does Joe Biden need to say something here for the benefit of Democrats?
I think he can weigh in if he wants. The reality is that it didn't take a lot of convincing for Kathy Hochul to do this. I don't believe she is, cognizant of the issues surrounding this. And Democrats have a real challenge in New York. Let's not forget the only reason Republicans have the House right now is because so many Republicans won in a state that otherwise it would have been an enormous shock as we look back at the last election. So this is a challenge for Democrats, and cost is the biggest issue on the agenda. So yeah, we may see Joe Biden weigh in. I don't know, but I also don't want to set aside the important issue of the environment and the fact that there are safety concerns in New York City. It is very difficult for first responders to move through the city in traffic, as it is for anybody in a car. So there are a lot of other considerations, but I think, a real big concern is if you have teachers working downtown and you're going to charge them more, this has got to be something that's addressed. And Kathy Hochul knows that full well. And I would also add, Kathy Hochul is in the mix right now because she's also being called on to pardon Donald Trump from the Manhattan charges. So a lot of focus on poor Kathy Hochul nationally at this point.
This is not a presidential campaign issue, obviously, Lisa, but if Donald Trump is talking about it, does the White House need to weigh in, or are Democratic leaders on Capitol Hill doing enough behind the scenes?
I think they're doing enough behind the scenes. I think the president has a lot of other issues to be talking about, and so this is typically what happens in election year too, Joe. Is that if the party is organized, they will have voices all across the country talking about issues that matter, so that can take some of the burden off of the presidential campaign and the candidate themselves to have to talk about these regional issues. He'll talk about it more broadly. He'll talk about, as Jeannie said, it's an environmental issue and the importance of making sure that we're being mindful towards first responders and teachers and other people that could be affected by this kind of regulatory burden. So that to me sort of strikes as maybe not something the president will weigh in on, but more so that's how we're seeing Washington weigh in other ways.
Well, it's interesting watching Congress work without making laws, but trying to influence things, and a heck of a lot of messaging that's going on lately, far beyond this. A vote today, we started our conversation with this hour on the Right to Contraception Act in the U.S. Senate. This is a Democratic initiative here that will not likely lead to a law. It's going to go nowhere in the House. It would help to reverse, according to Democrats, the impact of the Dobbs decision, the sort of spreading impact. It might get ahead of a ruling against mifepristone in the Supreme Court. Senator Katie Britt, the Republican from Alabama, calls this the summer of scare tactics. And the fact of the matter is, we have been seeing this on both sides. The House had its turn yesterday with the vote on sanctioning the International Criminal Court, which wants to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. Jeannie, the campaign of fear-mongering, as Katie Britt calls it, will come to a head today with this vote on the Right to Contraception Act. Is this another good moment for Democrats, as Lisa might suggest?
It is campaign season, so they're in full swing. But I would just remind Katie Britt that, yes, this is not going to pass, but the reality is people are scared, to use her word. Why are they scared? a few weeks ago, Donald Trump told a Pittsburgh station that he was open to letting states restrict access to birth control. So I wish I could agree with Senator Britt and say, yeah, this is just a scare tactic, sort of like an empty kitchen, if you will. But it's not. It is the reality.
I don't know if we're getting some music here, but it sounds good to me. Either way, Lisa Camuso Miller, this is the way it goes in a campaign season, right? Should voters expect anything more than what we're seeing right now?
Oh, absolutely. I'm still laughing at Jeannie's the empty kitchen comment, which was pretty strong and pretty hilarious. I mean, well done, Jeannie. No, but Joe, the other thing too is that, look, in every poll, in every study, in every story, in everything you see, the American electorate is not happy with either one of these candidates, right? They wish that we had better choices, different choices. And so in the absence of any real scandal, in the absence of any real anything, and by scandal, there's plenty of scandal, but scandal that people can wrap their brains around and care about, there's going to be a lot of this. There's going to be a lot of the up or down votes that are happening for messaging and things that are happening as it relates to whatever it is we can to scare people about, whether it's loss of contraception, whether it's the environmental issues, whether it's, that Democrats are going too far, that there's too much access to the president as it relates to Hunter Biden. We're going to hear it. People are going to be exhausted by the time we get to Election Day. I'm absolutely certain of that.
Yet no laws will be made, and you kind of wonder what it is we're going to come back to in the fall here, if we're going to be talking about government shutdowns or what else, as we spend time with our panel, Jeannie Shanzano and Lisa Camuso Miller. From congestion pricing to messaging votes, it's all coming from Capitol Hill at the moment. Joe Biden is overseas, which we haven't had a chance to touch on yet, and he will be speaking tomorrow from the D-Day commemoration, the 80th anniversary. He flew to Paris, landed in France this morning, and will have a lot more to say. Jeannie, it brings us back to this idea of the power of the incumbency and a real opportunity potentially for Joe Biden tomorrow. You can talk about tear down this wall, or even Ronald Reagan's speech, point to Hawk. What can Joe Biden make of this moment?
I think what he's going to make of it is he's going to try to show a real distinction between himself and Donald Trump. I mean, we remember when Donald Trump was over there not wanting to go to the cemetery, worried about his hair. We know his view on our NATO allies. This is, of course, one of the trips that it's going to be taken at a time when so many of the veterans are elderly. So we don't know how many more years we will have veterans from that war left. And of course, it's a time when Russia and Ukraine are still in war, in Europe. So it is an important moment, certainly for Joe Biden and the world, and also for him politically to say, I am a very, very different president, and I'm a very different leader than Donald Trump. And that's particularly important for our NATO and European allies.
Well, we'll have a lot more for you on that as we make our way through the next 24 hours. A very impressive display that we're going to see tomorrow as our allies come together in Normandy to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings, and to see these 100-year-old, in some cases older, veterans making their last trip there has been a really incredible American moment that we'll all be able to share together here on Bloomberg. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Glad you came along. It's the Wednesday edition. Balance of power. Breaking news in New York. Congestion pricing will be delayed as we connect the dots back to Washington. Stay with us.